Salutations, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Podcast the Storm, where socially awkward outcasts, crazy weirdos, and all around nerds convene to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the nerdy occultist, aka the authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Hello, everyone. Please ignore the shenanigans in the background. And also, if my Twitter is to be believed, today is the birthday of John Constantine. So that is now noted. If my Twitter is to be believed.
And I'm your host / Time Lord Wannabe, the brainstormer of pop culture. How's everyone doing tonight? And I have been given a bag full of Wendy's.
Huzzah.
Yep.
It's always a good day when there's Wendy's involved.
Right. So I have some things going on in my house right now. So if there's some background noise, I am sorry. But yeah, well, okay, so we have, like we've been doing for a while now, we have 4 articles. The first one is one we didn't cover last week, unfortunately. So we'll be covering that. It's a Mary Sue article. It's from one of not. I'll just pull it up. And again, I really gotta remember opening these articles before we start these.
You remembered to pull up the intro though, so we are making progress.
I always pull up the intro.
Right, but you did it ahead of time, so you didn't forget to.
True.
So we are making progress.
Okay. 1 sec. Okay, Chrome tab. There we go. Okay. The Mary Sue. The Mary Sue cartoon teenagers shouldn't be held to unrealistic standards by Princess Weeks. This was published April 29th, 2020. Any thoughts on the title?
This really hinges on the term unrealistic and what she is defining as unrealistic. Because if this were a Rachel Leachman article, for example, I would be banking on her saying all meritocracy was unrealistic. But Princess Weeks, as I recall, is among the more sane of the Mary Sue contributors. That being said, the Mary Sue is a wretched hive of scum and internet villainy who basically defamed the honey badgers. So all y'all at least have one fuck you out of me.
Okay, so yeah, all right. So this is obviously talking about the Netflix She-Ra, the Princess Powers thing. I haven't seen it nor really care to, even though I do have a Netflix. And I don't know, part of me thinks maybe we should review that series, but I also kind of don't want to.
Well, if we had more hours like we used to, we probably could make a sub series out of it, because there probably is a lot of riffable material there. But...
Yeah. Okay. So shall we begin?
We shall proceed.
As I've been watching Netflix and Noel Stevenson's She-Ra and the Princesses of Power in preparation for the newest season, and also scrolling through the internet, one of the things that keeps getting discussed is the prospect of a redemptive story for fan, fan favorite Catra.
Who, if I'm remembering correctly, was one of the villains in the original show. So
I think she's also a villain in this, but more of a tragic villain.
yeah,
in this.
that's where I'm thinking they're going with it. I'm just saying that from what knowledge I have of both of the previous iterations of the He-Man universe, I remember Catra being a villain. So be that as it may.
Mm. Ooh, nice. Mm. Say what you want about fast food, and I'm not a big fan of fast food myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I will never not like fries from fast food places, especially like fresh.
Yeah, especially ever since Wendy started doing the fresh cut variation of fries, because those are probably the most tasty.
Mm-hmm. So, throughout the show, Catra has been a character who, as a result of her trauma, PTSD, and being raised as an emotionally starved child soldier, makes irrational, hurtful, cruel, and sometimes even evil decisions.
I think you might be minimizing her evil just saying, because again, she's been a villain in every iteration of this show, or its adjacent shows, so you might be minimizing her evil slightly, but then again, they might be trying to do like a Zuko style thing with her, so I don't know.
Yep. All right. I learn how to chew quicker. However, in the discourse around Catra, I think we should all remember that the character in question isn't some average human teenager or adult on a free-form show. She is a severely abused teenager.
Okay.
So yeah, maybe like a Zuko thing.
I hope it's a Zuko thing. It probably won't be as good as Zuko because let's face it, Zuko's arc is some of the greatest material in animation history.
Here. When I was a teenager, I remember reading the fifth Harry Potter books and completely loathing Harry for his emotional evisceration of Dumbledore after Sirius died. For me, it seemed melodramatic and over the top for a character who had rarely had emotional outbursts like that.
Well, to be fair, he was under the influence of a fragment of Voldemort's soul that was waking up within him during Order of the Phoenix, because that was kind of the whole like major subplot of Order of the Phoenix. And god damn it, you made me defend Harry Potter.
Ouch. Um, hmm. In fact, when I think about the moment I stopped liking Harry as a character, this is one of the moments I remember. It doesn't help that the passage puts all of his dialogue in caps lock, which in retrospect seems like another Rowling red flag more than anything.
Okay, we can agree that J.K. Rowling is a butter when it comes to writing, so there is that. And yes, I'm aware that it was our generation's like first stepping stone to reading, and I was very obsessed with it between the ages of like 6 and 10. I don't, however, give a fuck. So there.
Mm-hmm. All right. As an adult, however, someone who has had to work through emotional trauma and issues that I've long ignored, I can see that Harry was reacting to the last bit of safety he felt in this world being taken from him. One of the few loving links between himself and his parents ripped away.
Yeah, to be fair to Potter and Rowling, of all of the problems I had with Harry Potter as a universe, and they are myriad, she is good at some of the emotional beats when she doesn't make things out from up her ass, which is
Mm-hmm.
awful.
Plus, Dumbledore could have handled things better. I was, as a teenager, expecting Harry to react like a grown up, not as an emotionally abused teenager.
To be fair, I think Hermione had a similar problem in the movies. When it came to her quote unquote development, or as I call it, de-evolution, because you see her in Philosopher's Stone or Sorcerer's Stone for us Yanks, because apparently we couldn't be bothered to know what a philosopher was. You see her in the Sorcerer Philosopher's Stone movie give Harry this really heartfelt sort of expositional advice in the chess chamber, and that's just the first movie. Meanwhile, in book 4, she's throwing a hissy, or in movie 4, she's throwing a hissy fit because somebody else is dancing with her date at the Yule Ball. So yeah, I don't know to what extent that's J.K. Rowling and to what extent that's the movies being shit, but well, actually, I do know because that wasn't such a problem in the books. But that being said, there is a track record for characters acting unreasonably stupid, even by like teenage standards.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I will give Harry the excuse that he was under the influence of, a literally soulless maniacal overlord at the time that was playing with his perceptions and making everything more traumatic than it otherwise would have been.
Mm-hmm. The character of Catra is someone who we've seen as emotionally abused by her maternal figure. As we go back, we see that Shadow Weaver explicitly harmed Catra in a way she did not do with the other Fright Zone kids. They also never, Adora included, seemed to do anything to help her out of that situation.
Again, going mostly on my familiar with previous iterations of this, though, she was doing kind of fucked up things that became very hard. Like, saying you should have tried harder to save me is all well and good, but when you're in the process of doing extremely fucked up shit for basically no other reason than wahaha, it becomes extremely hard to save a person in that instance. Not every character is pure as a driven snow, and therefore not every character needs to be held to the standards of, say, Michael Carpenter from the Dresden Files.
I'll be right back. I gotta get something to drink.
We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day.
Okay, I am back, and yes, Dawn, I have a root beer.
So, for those of you playing the Brainstormer drinking game at home, you may drink now.
Yeah, note to self, and also take note, folks. Don't eat a sandwich real quick. Get painful hiccups.
Well, I wouldn't know because aside from grilled cheese, I avoid sandwiches altogether. But okay.
Yeah.
Also, fuck you, dog.
Yeah, I really have nothing to say there. Dawn pretty much cover all the bases on that. All right, so then she continues, I am not saying that Catra shouldn't be held accountable or that she did not have abusive behaviors in her past, but I also think we should take in the fact that she has not been given the tools to grow in healthy ways.
Okay, fair enough. But I still think you might be sugarcoating this a little bit more than you probably should be, especially given that the average feminist reaction to a movie like Joker is don't make evil people sympathetic.
Isn't that the whole point of storytelling, is to make you empathize with certain characters?
Yes, but let's not get sidetracked into that, because if we do, we'll be here forever.
True. That's damn good chicken.
Wendy's chicken usually is.
Don't get me started on their bacon, like double bacon cheeseburgers.
Again, I wouldn't know because I don't like burgers in general. And then it got very quiet.
Yep. So after reading that terrible Lilo and Stitch take, I realized that while we have the language of social justice to call out fictional characters for abusive habits, the show has never, ever tried to make it seem like Catra's actions are justified. They have never made her just a victim, and so while we should absolutely hold her accountable, we shouldn't forget that we are talking about a traumatized person. Right, but where do you eventually draw the line for a character who's done bad things?
Okay, there's that. And then there's the impulse to back this whole thing right the fuck up. Social justice, my darling, does not have a monopoly or even a substantial, proportion of the ability to talk about characters sympathetically or even on moral grounds. You are not the only people who have discovered the human capacity for empathy. Please fuck off with that shit. Morality, at least on an emotional level, should not be held in a single ideology. It should be a reflex possessed by every human brain under normal neurological circumstances. And secondly, once again, I just want to point out this: when it is a villain in your average pop cultural landscape, or it's a deliberately sympathetic or ambiguous character like Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, seeing his victimhood or emphasizing his victimhood makes every aristocratic elitist in the media go but you can look at an out and out female villain, again going off of every appearance of her, barring this one, and you can say that even though you don't want to focus entirely on her victimhood, we should still focus more energy on the fact that she is a victim. And this is one of the reasons why people don't like feminism, especially people who you would put in those victimhood categories. Because victimhood emphasizes personhood at the expense of agency and de-emphasizes any aspect of personhood that doesn't fit with a victimhood narrative. So you can fuck right off with that shit. You are literally focusing on the victimhood of this character primarily because she is female, knowing full well you would not give the same treatment to a male character unless they were very thinly threading a very thin eye of a needle, or if they had some other demographical inconsistency you could exploit, like if they were a gay person or a black person or so on or so on or so on. Basically, you will not have empathy for men simply because they are male, but you will directly overemphasize the victimhood of a female character specifically because she is female, knowing full well you wouldn't do the same thing to a male character. I realize you're not saying this as bluntly or explicitly as, say, Rachel Leachman would, but because you are the one I have hope for, princess, I'm afraid I'm gonna be a little bit harsh with you this time. Or as Link would say, excuse me, princess. For anyone that didn't get that, look up the Mario and Zelda show from I believe it was the 90s. Link had a habit of being very sassy to everyone in that show and would always reply to any request or demand of Zelda with "Excuse me, princess," and it's much funnier when he says it than when I just said it. Probably.
50-50.
Moving on.
Right. Okay. All right. Catra has the same amount of room to redeem herself as Zuko did on Avatar: The Last Airbender. Hell, you can argue that Zuko entered the series in an even more privileged place because he at least had Iroh and his mother at one point. For Catra, when Adora left the Horde, it was as if her Iroh had left.
To be fair, at least a third of Zuko's arc was without Iroh, because that was kind of a whole point of part of his arc. Like most of the Earth Kingdom, or actually most of the Book 3 Fire plot was him dealing with the fact that he had betrayed his uncle and fucked up royally.
It was more of a father to him than his own father.
Yeah. But that being said, A, I'm glad you brought up Zuko, but B, don't you dare use the word privilege around Zuko, because as we all know, the word privileged in feminist parlance means we therefore don't have to pay as much attention to this character's needs or desires. That's what privilege means. It means you're fortunate, or it basically means you're a spoiled brat, so we don't have to listen to you. That's generally speaking what privilege amounts to whenever it's feminist media criticism. There are some aspects of feminism where it doesn't directly mean that when you're dealing with actual people, but when you're dealing with feminist media criticism, it basically means this character's a spoiled brat, so we don't have to take their pain nearly as seriously as we otherwise would. And incidentally, you saying that about Zuko of all characters makes me want to firebend right here and now. And I'm not even the kind of guy that identified with the firebenders as a kid. I wanted to be a waterbender as a kid.
I always saw myself, honestly, a part of me always wanted to firebend, but mostly just to do the lightning.
Yeah, lightning is the one thing I wanted to do from firebending, and to be honest with you, I figured out a way that waterbenders probably could figure out how to do it. Because you know how they can use the healing thing to manipulate energy directly?
Mm-hmm.
Well, imagine if they used that to harness that energy and then split it like the firebenders do. You basically get a waterbender who use lightning.
Personally, I think I would have been an air nomad.
Honestly, I see you more as an earthbender, if anything.
See, that was my initial thought, like when I first watched Airbender, when it was first coming out.
Mm.
But I think now, at this time, and now as myself, probably an airbender.
I could see it, but probably you'd just end up like an earth. You'd probably just end up as an earthbender who was really zen, kind of like Boomy.
Probably not as crazy.
Well, hopefully not. But then
I
again,
mean,
you're still young. He had a century worth of crazy to pile on to his already existing crazy.
mm-hmm.
We'll see how crazy you are after about a century.
Ugh. God, I hope I still look young by then.
Well, by then we might have unlocked the secret to immortality.
Yeah, I ain't accepting that secret.
I would, just because I feel like I could really accomplish some shit if I had a few more centuries to play around with.
Okay, so where was I? Right, okay. When people say, well, she has Scorpia, I don't really think they understand what it means to have a starvation economy mindset. Don, uh, any context on that? Starvation economy?
I'm thinking it's something to do with the fact that basically nothing grows in the evil parts of Eternia, basically. So she might be trying to pull that out of her ass, as far as I'm aware. But they might have actually gave some context to it in the show, where like the reason why the evil people are so self-interested in evil is because they're like exiled to the desert parts of Eternia, maybe, and that's me being general. It sounds like something she took out of her ass, but then again, Princess Weeks tends to be the more reasonable of the Mary Sue contributors, so I will give benefit of the doubt and say maybe this is a thing that has context in the show. Either way,
I don't really think it's really for the show. I think it's more of like some type of psychological thing.
yeah, I think either way that she might be reaching a little bit.
Mm.
But it seems very much like she's trying to append more victimhood to the evil side than.
Okay. So she explains that term, starvation economy, in the next paragraph.
Okay.
Okay. I first came across this term in the book The Ethical Slut. There's a book called The Ethical Slut.
The sad thing is how unsurprising I find it. But the baffling thing is starvation economy is actually a fairly broadly used term. So the thing that makes me repeatedly want to face palm until I have brain damage is, of all the places she could have possibly heard the.
Don't. Oh, shit. Give it a minute, folks. He will show back up when he can. I ain't gonna sing for you. Unless you want your ears bleeding. But I yeah, I really got nothing to say on this article right now because. Mm,
What was the last thing you heard? I'll redo the rant.
pretty much when you were talking about the term starvation economy, that's where you kind of cut off.
Okay, the term starvation economy is actually a fairly broadly used economic term. So the thing that makes me want to repeatedly facepalm, and I did, was
Mm-hmm.
because of all the places she could have conceivably heard starvation economy, she heard it in a feminist book first called The Ethical Slut, which
That's
just
a
goes
feminist
to
book,
yes,
huh?
which just goes to prove to you, ladies and gentlemen, the average intellectual erudition of a writer for the Mary Sue.
And the authors describe it as the belief that our capacities for love, intimacy, and connection are finite, that there is never enough to go around, and that if you give some to one person, you must be taking some away from another. At
Okay,
least they.
okay, okay. fuck every part of that sentence because I just rage. The term starvation economy in economics has bumfuck nothing to do with people's emotions. It has to do with essentially the economics of food under a famine. And apparently a feminist took that and turned it into that brightly colored spree of feeling-oriented gobbledygook you see before you. I return to the face palming again. God damn it. To take an intellectually viable term like that and to turn it into something that you could basically find on your average episode of Blue's Clues, just so much rage. You make not only does feminism make a mockery of itself, which it does because it's intellectually incoherent, but to take intellectually viable concepts from other fields and just make up whole new definitions of that shit. It's just I despair. Despair for humanity and existence and all the things. We have failed as a species. Fucking hell. Moving on. Lest I fucking explode.
Right. Okay. So let's see. Where was I? Oh. All right. They explained that you learn this from parents who never give a sufficient amount of attention, or in Catra's case, none at all. It leads you to believe that all love is cutthroat, and it also makes you suspicious when people offer you love.
Okay, that is a completely different term. But like, I don't know why she brought up starvation economy if she was just going to basically swap its definition for like I believe it's social deprivation or affection deprivation that more closely aligns to in like actual sociological theory. Why the fuck? And all I'm thinking now is ways that this has been done better in other things. Moving on though, because I can't process this much stupid at the moment.
Mhm.
I actually facepalmed myself into having a headache.
For Catra, when Scorpia arrives and wants to be friends, she has already lost her best friend to the enemy with air quotes, and not only that, but Adora left because she just figured out the Horde was evil. Not when Catra was being abused, but when two relative strangers showed her that. For someone who believes that love is finite and has experienced that, it is not, then easy to lean on or believe in the love of another person.
Okay, but the reason in the context of storytelling why it's easier for someone to see um that a person is bad from the outside rather than from the inside is because, as with so many things, it is very hard to tell that you're in a bad situation unless you have something to compare it to. And also, as we know, there is a tendency to make excuses for people's bad behavior if that bad behavior is what we're raised with. Because it's essentially, I believe they call it exposure bias. I might be mistaken there. Don't fucking at me. Essentially, if you find yourself in a negative situation, you find reasons to rationalize why that negative situation is okay, simply because you don't want to have to deal with the emotional repercussions of having to actually deal with the fact that holy shit, the person who was supposed to be nurturing towards you is in fact not doing that at all. And once again, all I can think of is ways that this was done better in other shit. We might go into it if she mentions this again, but god damn.
We sometimes want so badly for people to be healed and to grow that we forget that growth not only takes time, but it has to be fostered in the appropriate soil.
Okay, I have no problems with that sentiment, except for the fact that you don't apply it evenly to all characters. Again, that was basically the whole impetus behind the Joker controversy, with people were like, you're saying that this person has reasons why they were fucked up in the head. You can't say that people who do bad things have reasons for being fucked up in the head. That makes us want to empathize with them. So, yeah, apart from the minor hypocrisy of that, I have no problem with that statement.
Especially if what you want is accountability, not punishment.
Also, perfectly reasonable statement.
And that is the end.
Okay, so there still was less stupid than an average Mary Sue article, but I think there was a lot of sugarcoating in that, if I had to guess. Granted, I would have to watch the new She-Ra for full context, but yeah, I'm suspecting there was some sugarcoating and some narrative spinning as far as that goes.
Okay, so our next article, and I have to bring it up. 1 sec. All right. So yeah, our next article is from Bounty in the Comics. Neil Gaiman wants trans writers to work on Netflix's adaptation of his Sandman series. This by J.B. Augustine. It's published May 4th, 2020. I would have to, I think it just needs proper, because that's kind of a clickbait title, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, and Neil tends to be more reasonable than that. Granted, there is a little bit of that Trump delirium syndrome going on with him, so Lord only knows how hard in the social justice paint he's gone. But having read this article, I think the way he requests it and the context he requested it in are a little bit less worrying than that title might imply.
Alright, so yeah, Neil Gaiman's Sandman comic has featured transgender characters and dealt with related issues, making the Vertigo title ahead of its time in a lot of ways. As such, the author wants to have trans writers on the team of the upcoming Netflix series adaptation, and he is pretty set on realizing this desire.
The only thing I would say to him in that regard is, well, Neil, you weren't trans when you wrote Game of You, and it became one of the mainstays of like transgender literature, so it can't be that bad, can you, Neil? And that at least loosely implies that you don't have to be trans to be a good writer of trans characters, and also consequently, not every trans person is going to be a good writer for trans characters, because they still have to have the basic skill of writing, and if they don't, they're gonna fuck it up, unfortunately.
Gaiman had a conversation with Hugo-winning science fiction and fantasy writer Nora K. Jemisin. And if I'm saying that last name wrong, I'm sorry.
I think it might be Jameson, but I don't know.
Well, there's no A; it's an I, like J E M I S I N. So Jemison, I suppose. Again,
Yeah,
if I'm saying that last
like
name wrong, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And apparently she has wrote a story called The 100,000 Kingdoms that was posted on YouTube.
I have no context for this writer, but if Neil Gaiman considers them worthy, then I'm not going to argue until I see some evidence one way or another.
Oh, apparently I think, no, wait. Yep. They have the video here. I'm not sure. We might check it out. We might look at it some other time.
Yeah.
Because we got other things to do.
The way they made it sound was that it was the entire audiobook, which we don't have time for, so.
Well, no, it's a conversation kind of deal.
Oh, the actual conversation. Well, yeah, maybe if we have time, we'll go back and hear it from the horse's mouth. Because that's the other thing. Some things look bad in text that make sense in conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
That was posted on YouTube. During it, he brought up social issues and a character from the graphic novels Wanda, a trans woman who appeared in the 1993 story Game of You.
I would say, speaking as probably one of the go-to Sandman fans here on the YouTubes, Game of You is probably the weakest story out of the lot. And no, before anyone goes there, it's not because of transphobia, it's because it didn't have a whole lot of doing dream things in it. And because Sandman is essentially the story of Dream and his various shenanigans, that irks me a little bit. Though I really like the character of Thessaly in that story. She's like an immortal witch that winds up in a boarding house because reasons.
Mm. Okay. Mentioning Game of You specifically, Gaiman said he requests there be trans men and trans women in the writer's room. And they have the quote here. Hold on. The full quote here is, all right, my biggest request to the Sandman showrunner for when we get to the season with Game of You in it is that we have trans men and trans women in the writer's room, not as consultant, but as writers.
Okay, see, that's not unreasonable in that, and this is why I'm not angry with Neil for this, because he said specifically for Game of You, which if you're going to have trans people at any point anywhere, it would be in Game of You because that was the most sort of trans heavy part of Sandman. However, I don't see why it wouldn't be good enough to have them be consultants, especially if you got like, I don't know, a dozen of them. But that being said, I beg you with all of my heart and all of my soul, Mr. Gaiman, please do not let the identity of the people in question trump meritocracy. Please pick good writers who just so happen to be trans rather than trans writers and hope that they're good. Please. Please, 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 please. Like I said, I think Game of You is already the weakest Sandman story, so don't make it any worse for the love of Dream in this instance.
Um, yeah, I'm just going to say the same thing. Like, I don't really think it matters what orientation or whatever they're doing. It's more of can they write and can they contribute something to make the story good, if not better than the original.
Mm-hmm. And that being said, I'll return to my previous point because I think I might have sprung it a little too early. Neil, my darling Neil, you are not trans, and yet you managed to create one of the go-to trans stories in probably any medium, let alone in comics. So if anything, this proves that you don't have to be trans to be a good writer of trans characters, and loosely implies that not every trans person will by default be a good writer. So please, for the love of God, somewhere in the back of your brain, remember meritocracy. Please. Moving on.
Right. I had a lot of trans friends, and I was putting my friends into my comic. He continued. In Game of You, Wanda had parents that didn't accept her gender identity. Wanda died, and they buried her as a man, marking the grave with Wanda's former name, her dead name. That which was changed and therefore is dead to the transitioning person.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm not there yet, and it sounds kind of confusing. I mean, like, I'm not gonna say bad because again, I haven't read it, so I don't really have that.
Okay, so short version. A creature escapes from the dreaming called the Cuckoo, and it goes after this girl who is a dream nexus. And all of her friends who happen to all live in this boarding house go after the Cuckoo to try and save. I believe the character who was the dream nexus was literally named Barbie, unless I'm misremembering. I might be mixing up characters' names there. But anyway, so Thessaly, the witch character in the story, uses an alliance with the goddess of the moon or the gods of the moon to transport them to dreaming. They find the Cuckoo. They kill the Cuckoo. Um, Dream shows up for like 5 seconds. I don't even really remember what he contributed to the story. Yes, in the process, one of the friends dies, which was Wanda, and because her parents didn't approve of her being a her, they used her birth given name, um, which is framed as very insulting. It's the closest Sandman comes to being preachy, which is why I want to be very, very careful with this shit. And I I don't fault Neil for having trans friends. I had a trans friend in college who was literally my DM when it came to Dungeons and Dragons, for a quite long time. But please, for the love of God, don't let representation rule storytelling. Please. And if Neil, you're still in touch with those friends of yours that are trans, and you want to invite them in, by all means. Anyone who's a friend of Neil Gaiman can't be that desolately uncreative. And also, I think you'd probably work best off of people you already know, rather than getting, I don't know, say Mags Visaggio in there or something. Heaven for I seriously, like, I will vomit if Mags Visaggio comes anywhere near any variation of the Sandman.
Hey, Dom,
Mm-hmm.
are you aware of the term jinxing yourself?
Yes, I am aware, but my God, just that literally sent a shiver down my spine. The idea of Mags Visaggio in any vicinity of the Sandman, let alone the Sandman's weakest and most preachy story as is.
All right. Gaiman clarified he had to write stories like that at the time because there were not very many open trans writers at the time. Today, he says he would do things differently. The biggest difference now is that I would have trans people write it. It wouldn't be writing that. At the time, I looked around and didn't see those writers. I
Neil, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was fixing what I said because it's I wouldn't be writing that. I
Yeah,
misread the quote by accident.
yeah, I got that. Okay, Neil, for the love of God, man. Well, actually, no, for the love of Dream, man. Do not marginalize yourself at the expense of anyone else. You are one of the greatest writers working today. Please do not undermine your own self-worth because of this. If again, if you want to have trans writers in there, that's fine. But it is your magnum opus they're translating here, sir. So don't let them walk all over you. It's Dream stories first. It's Dream's story first, your story second, and anyone else's story a distant third to that. And yes, I put the character above the writer. Don't at me.
All right. He added, "I'm so fascinated to see what a trans writer's room, what stories they would tell with those characters.
Please,
If they were actual writers, it wouldn't matter."
yeah, please, for the love of God, focus more on the writer part than the trans part, for the sake of my favorite comic ever written and the possible entity that inspired them.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had more to say.
Well, I could have, but I felt like that was a good place to leave it now because I have a feeling I'm going to need to rant more in a second.
With more trans writers out there nowadays than before, especially in comics, Gaiman might get his wish. Production on Netflix Sandman adaptation is halted due to the mass coronavirus-related shutdowns, but based on dialogue read during a leaked audition, we know the plot. Dream going to the realm of man to repatriate his escaped creations. Will stick closely to the source material.
Yes, thank God. Also, thank Dream. Also thank Dream that even if we get to Game of You, it probably won't be for like 7 seasons. Because from what I remember the last time we covered this, each season is going to roughly cover at least part of each volume, so it'll be a while before we get to Game of You. Unless they change the order around, which they might. Because with it jumping around like it does, there's no reason to be super chronological with things. However, I still hope that they wait a bit for Game of You, because there's so many great stories to get to before Game of You. And I would honestly prefer we just not. Can we just ignore the wake entirely? Just entirely ignore the wake, please. Can Dream just not die this time? I'd be good with that. In fact, I wouldn't care if the entire Game of You, if the entire Game of You like season was written by Magnus Audio, if at the end of it we could just get Dream not dying and Daniel not being a prissy little Dream Jesus-y bitch afterwards.
I'm done asking if you're good because I feel like asking that only enrages you more.
No, I think I'm good for now. But seriously, ignore the wake, and I will tolerate even Magnus Audio, for the love of God.
Right. So yeah, that was the end of it. Fuck, I should. God damn it. I should check the video first.
Maybe we'll get the hang of this by the time we're in the hundreds somewhere.
Well, I feel like it's kind of a long video, and I will check it like after the stream or something.
Mm-hmm.
And we're getting through this pretty quickly, actually.
Yeah, it's not even 9 yet, which amazes me considering how long the Mary Sue rant was.
This is awkward.
Well, at least we'll have stuff to do if we actually go through too quickly. Yeah, but seriously, can Dream just not die this time? I'm good with Dream just not dying this time.
All right. So to our third article, and kind of last article, It's from Newsarama. It's published by, Dear Comic Book Creators, Make It Matter. It's by Jim McLuchan. And I'm sorry if I said that name wrong. It's published April 29th, 2020.
I at least on first impression agree with the title.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not familiar with the rest of the article, so but at least on first impression I agree with the title. So
There's actually a funny story to this. See, I was looking up stuff on Bleeding Fool, and I came across an article that was kind of similar in the vein of this, but it referenced this article. So I figured since it was something just basically the same kind of thing, I figured why not?
We'd go closer to the source, basically.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So our current COVID-19 landscape has changed our lives in many ways. One seemingly positive way, we now have a lot more time. Yeah, some of us enjoy them more time than others.
Yeah, it is officially the time of the introverted shut-in. Huzzah! Reminds me of the episode of Jimmy Neutron where Jimmy created an ice age and Carl had a plan to make the future belong to like heavyset kids because he assumed like their fat would keep them through the long winter.
I don't remember that episode.
Was the one where he like enhanced the sunblock because it was too hot and it accidentally caused an ice age.
Huh. That was a good show. I don't think it ever had a proper ending.
No, it really didn't, but given what happened to Fairly Odd Parents in some of the later seasons, I'm kind of glad Jimmy Neutron ended when it did. Though I wish it would have gone on at least a little bit longer.
Well, if anything, maybe it could have just done like what Ed and Eddie did, a movie kind of
proper end. Well, it started with a movie, so ending with a movie probably would have made the most sense.
Mm-hmm. All right, time, the most precious of all commodities, especially in the publishing world. Yeah, actually, no, I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, no, time is precious.
And relative, if you believe Einstein.
Which I do because my first interest in life basically was theoretical physics. And I actually once owned a book actually written by him. Actually I do know what I do with it. But that's a backstory for a different day.
Yeah. I mean, I believe it too. It's just I see it from a different standpoint.
I feel like Doofenshmirtz sometimes from Phineas and Ferb with all of the emotionally scarring backstory.
God, Doofenshmirtz was so awesome.
Yes.
Phineas and Ferb was just, God damn, that was a good show.
Yeah, that show was awesome.
I did like how it ended too. And off topic, back topic.
Yeah.
We're always telling ourselves that if we had more time, we do that one special thing. And now that we have time, we're watching Tiger King again. I haven't seen that. I didn't really care to. It just didn't.
I haven't either. I've heard mixed things about it, so I'm leaving it alone until I actually have a spare moment to do things. Because oddly enough, even though I should have more free time than ever, what with the lockdown, I also now have a boyfriend who takes up most of my time. Happily.
That actually might be the most surprising thing that's ever been said on this podcast.
What, that I have a boyfriend or that he takes up most of my time now? Also, for anyone who wonders where the fuck I've been for several days, that's where I've been. I've been video chatting with him every night for a week.
Yeah. Okay. Back to the article. If I only had more time has been exposed our convenient lie. Comic creators and publishers have also told us that if only they had more time, they could do that big thing, that important thing, that grandiose thing, but that never seems to happen, either unless you count giant summer crossover XYZ as big, important, or grandiose. Spoiler alert, no one does, though curiosity
Yeah.
they all bought 6 tie-in books.
Can we just knock off the big events for a while? Can we establish a stable status quo before we go mucking around with it again, please? But yeah, I totally agree with him here. I think what we all should have been saying, rather than if I had more time, is if I had more motivation. Um, because that seems to be the if I had less things to worry about might have been a better thing. Because that's the thing. Even though we have more time now, we either spend it running away from the stress or fixating on the stress. The real issue is the real issue is in the modern era. We never let our minds, or rather, we never let our stresses go long enough to actually enjoy anything. And because we don't enjoy anything, we don't have the motivation to accomplish it. Yeah. But I agree. Can we just knock off the big events until we have established a decent status quo that we can then go mucking around with if we feel like it? Though honestly, after 20 years of this shit, I'm really in the vein of not feeling like any more events ever until someone actually has a decent idea for one.
Hello.
Yes. Also, Marvel, if you want somebody to help fix Doctor Strange, hit me up. Well, actually, no, I'm not even going to be that selfish. There's a guy on Twitter. He goes by Sanctum Blog. He is probably the world's biggest expert on Doctor Strange. Hire him to write it. I want that. I don't even need it to be me. Just hire someone who gives a damn about Doctor Strange to write Doctor Strange, please. Also, brief shout out to Matt Key, who is probably the biggest celebrity fan of Doctor Strange, aside from possibly Scott Derrickson, who wrote the previous one.
All right. But hey, there's really no excuse, as IDW has announced they're publishing nothing for May, and Aspen is on hiatus, and Marvel is slowing the roll by 20 or 30%, and DC is doing whatever the DCs of the world do. Time is in abundance. So here's a modest proposal for what to do with your time, comic creatives and publishers. I like this guy already.
Yeah, this guy, I feel like I could have a long, interesting conversation with.
Yeah. All right. Make it matter.
Here. However, I am going to reserve my praise until you've actually defined what matter means in this instance, because matter to a social justice fanatic, for example, means tie it to external socio-political bullcrap until you can't determine that it's anything else. But matter, in the sense that I would say it, is make it internally valuable of and for its own sake. So which version of matter are you coming up with, or are you coming up with something completely different from either definition? Is my question. Define your terms, as any good philosophically opinionated person should before they do anything.
This is the time to let your mind wander and come up with the perfect idea that will have impact, or turn up the gas on that back burner idea you had forever that you know people would love.
Okay, here is the problem with that. If we were living in the 80s or the 90s, I would be totally behind that sentiment. But the problem is the majority of the people writing today are social justice fanatics raised in art schools teaching critical theory, so to them, matter means socio-political woo. And I don't want any more heavy-handed socio-political woo than we would get anyway. So what I would say to this writer, whose name I don't remember.
Okay, so where was I? Look, we don't know for sure when the next damn issue of Batman or Fantastic Four is coming out anyway. So there's not the all-consuming need to feed the assembly line and get pages to the artist. That specific gravity of comics since time immemorial.
Yeah, I like this guy, but I think he's missing a little bit of a point here, which is you're sending this to people who think the term matter means socio-political context rather than internal value. If you were talking to somebody like Stan Lee or Jack Kirby, I would be right behind this message. But as it happens, you're talking to people like Heather Antos and Max Saggio, which makes it scary. Or just bargain basement waste of talent like Brian Michael Bendis.
Use this time, breathe, and give us something special. It's been done before to great acclaim. And he has some examples here.
Proceed.
Okay, just all right. Main Spider-Man number 248, published 1984, contained the story "The Kid Who Collects Spider-Man," in which Spidey revealed his identity to a 9-year-old superfan who was stricken with leukemia and had mere weeks left to live.
Okay. I don't know if I would call that. Well, okay. That sounds very preachy and like really saccharine on its surface, but it could be done well. So
I've heard about this issue and this story, so
what have you heard? Good things, bad things, or indifferent?
I heard it's a pretty good story from what I remember. It's been a while since I heard it, so.
Okay, well that's good because it sounds very much like a PSA comic. That being said, if it's done right, then sure, but resist the urge to make it matter morally, I think is a caveat that I would throw in here. Morally or sociopolitically, either way. You don't need morality to tell a good story. Even if it's a good versus evil story, goddammit.
Alright, so Superman number 9, 1987, gave us Metropolis 900 Miles, John Byrne's backup story in which Lex Luthor daggles a fascinating and cruel moral choice in front of a small town waitress.
Again, I'm sure. Well, actually, that one sounds fairly epic, but again, resist the urge to go down the moral route, especially given the people we're talking to. Because again, it ain't 1970 anymore, or 1980, or 1990. It is the current year, unfortunately, which means that if you give them a moral inch, they will take a social justice. So just, I would just like note, like, can we just leave the morality out of it for a bit?
Well, I
Good
don't.
story stands morality for a bit.
Are you talking about modern comics or the comics that are being talked about here?
No, I'm not saying the ones here are afflicted with this issue. I'm just saying he's making both of the examples he's given have had a strong moral component. And if those are the examples he's offering, the current day writers are going to take that and use it as a means to go social justice. Because again, to modern day writers like Meg Zasagio, Gabby Rivera, Heather Antos, even though she doesn't work at Marvel anymore, and the like, to people like that, morality equates to social justice. So my issue here is I would just prefer we leave morality out of it for a bit, because morality, I'm burnt out on morality as far as like philosophical tracks go.
All right, Tahillam's here.
Hmm?
Good to see you too, man. Tahillam.
Hey Tillian, good to see you. So funny, that's the first thing you type every time you show up somewhere. Although I used to hate that you abbreviate "good to see you," Tillian, because every time I looked at it, it looked like "got to go," the abbreviation for "got to go," and not "good to see you." So I was so confused because it seemed like every time I showed up, you were leaving. Okay, but anyway, moving on.
You are kind of late though. That is a thing.
Yeah, you've missed us yelling at a Mary Sue article and begging Neil Gaiman to remember that meritocracy exists. So
Mhm.
you kind of might have missed the interesting articles.
Yeah. All right. So, Marvel's G.I. Joe number 21, 1984, presented Silent Interlude, in which writer-artist Larry Hama told a totally silent story that inspired now multiple generations of creators and showed the power that silence can have.
Okay, that I totally agree with because there is no morality necessarily there, being espoused or otherwise. It's just an interesting gimmick. However, again, I would caution you against subversion in the modern era because they'll see, oh, I see, you just have to give things a gimmick and they'll give it the lamest possible gimmick ever. That's how we get things like the character backstories in the New Warriors. That's how we get like magic backpack and internet gas.
Hey, Dalton, while
Mhm.
I don't totally disagree with you, I do think with this you're kind of reading a little too much into it.
No, but what I'm saying is he needs to be careful with what he's saying here because he needs to remember who, this is supposed to be like his open letter to comic creators. And the problem is, comic creators in this day and age refers to people like Brian Michael Bendis, Gabby Rivera, Heather Antos, even though she doesn't work at Marvel anymore, and the like. So you have to, if this is supposed to be like his open letter to comic creators, he needs to be aware of who his audience is. And with social justice warriors, if you give them a moral inch, they will take a mile. If you give them a socio-political inch, they will take a mile. The only other option would be somebody like EBS, and EBS is a opportunistic shyster with no principles. So, be aware of who your audience is, goddamn you, is all I'm saying.
Okay. Action Comics number 775, published 2001, was writer Joe Kelly's justifiably angry response to yet another wave of overgrim heroes, without quotes, and a powerful gut punch of a statement as to why Superman and unquenching morality still mattered. Oh, truth, justice. Whatever happened to truth, justice, and the American way?
What's so funny about truth, justice, and the
Oh,
American way?
right. Yeah. Which
The,
inspired Superman versus the Elite.
yeah, the one Superman story that even I like, and I don't like Superman. That being said, again, avoid moral themes if at all possible in the modern era because of how it will be interpreted by those that are actually in those positions in this day and age, for better and usually worse.
Okay. You probably know these books, even if you haven't read them, you've certainly heard about them. Look them up in your Overstreet, and guess what? their back issue value is even higher. Why? Because this is what makes comics great. This is the stuff that matters. This is the stuff that, even though it's often filtered through a prism of capes and tights, it's ultimately about humanity.
Okay, I'm gonna be very, very critical of you here because three of the examples you offered were moralistic in nature, and one of the examples you offered was like a gimmick or a subversion. So yeah, no, you can fuck off with that implication. I realize that that's probably not what you were trying to imply, but you just basically implied that morality and subversion are the only things that make comics great.
Don't. I'm gonna have to disagree with you. I think you're reading a little too much into it.
That being said, I'm still going to call it out because if I don't say it now, I'm gonna have to say it after they fucked it up. So yeah, you can take your everything needs to have a moral message and shove it. You can take your everything needs a gimmick and shove it.
Yeah,
And you
don't.
can
Again, I'm not disagreeing with you on that point. I'm thinking that you're not really. I think you're misreading that.
it's possible, but if I'm misreading it, it's because it's a likely misread. And I just want to say for the record, I don't I don't think that this is what he was trying to say, but whatever he was trying to say, he said poorly. So I just want to filter out the nasty little brain gremlins that might think, oh, so we just need to put a moral message into everything, or oh, we just need to put a gimmick into everything. Yeah, no, fuck off. Comics are valuable of and for their own sake. They don't need any particular deference to humanity to matter. Art matters first, and humans discover that art matters, not the
Okay.
other way around.
Can I? I feel like if I don't stop you now, you're gonna go on a rant for like an hour.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Moving on.
But to counteract your point, from how I myself have interpreted, because I think I'm not the one who constantly tries to read SJWism in it. No offense, Owen.
None taken.
Um, what I'm thinking, and I'm looking at this as a writer as well as like just a simple person, I guess is a way to say it. Um,
Layman, I think.
yeah,
And
as a
for the
layman.
record, I'm not seeing him as an SJW. I'm just saying,
No,
hey,
I don't. I
given
understand that. I mean, what you have interpreted from the writing.
Mhm.
That's what I think is where we're differing. Because my interpretation is, um, what he's saying, what matters is a story, is that they write a story that is one well crafted and good, and poses either ideas or ideas or questions or maybe a theme of sorts for
right,
readers
but
to.
if that's what he meant, he conveyed it poorly. If
Right,
that's what he
I'm not disagreeing with that, Dalton. I do think, yeah, it could have explained it better.
Mhm.
I'm just explaining how I've interpreted
Yeah,
this myself.
yeah. For the record, if that is what you meant, sir, I apologize for getting angry. But once again, you have to remember you're not writing in a vacuum here. It's going to be interpreted by people. And so, if I have to angrily go get away from the morality with, a water bottle like I'm disciplining a cat so that your actual message can get out, then that's what I'm going to do.
Right. So, yeah, like I said, in his terms of humanity, it's more of like heartfelt stories that do address certain issues, but not in a way that is moralizing or preaching, but more in a way that is respectful and just gives you the element of the superhuman, the human, the person behind the mask, and
Mhm.
just the things that kind of matter to an ordinary person who is reading these comics.
Mhm.
That's how I've interpreted it, at least.
All right. Fair, I suppose, but like I said, I'm going to be very critical of this so that if anyone stumbles on my reading of this and their brain starts to drift into the, oh, we just have to write a subversion, or oh, we just have to put a moral message into everything route, then I can gobsmack them away from the wrong route and go bad kitty essentially, or in this case, bad hipster, because no, bad hipster. Stop moralizing everything and stop subverting everything.
Is there a good hipster?
Most likely no, because a genuine hipster is simply a nerd. A hipster is what happens when you take a nerd and you remove everything genuine about them. Same or very similar aesthetics, very similar like persuasions and tastes, but none of the proper justification. That's how you get from nerd to hipster. A hipster is a nerd with no actual core.
Also, poor fashion sense.
Well, but the same is probably true of geeks. I mean, large glasses, old-fashioned clothes, etc., etc.
Oh,
That's what I'm
please.
saying. A
Hey,
hipster is what you have when you take everything about a nerd and basically strip away all of the irrelevant shit. All of the irrelevant shit then becomes a hipster.
hey, for the record, I think a lot of geeks actually have really good styles.
Well, true, but it is still very much a geek style.
Yeah, hipsters just try to look like they're actually. Never mind. I'm not gonna get into my personal grievances with hipsters.
Someday when we do another one of those another one of those just talking shows, we need to get into hipsters so you can just let out all of your rage about hipsters.
That would be therapeutic for me. Anyway, so give us human. We're all human beings and desperately seek out human connections. Trust yourself. Be bold. If it's important to you, there's a good chance it will be important to readers. You can do anything, and now is the time.
Okay, I sort of disagree with that because the things that I find compelling about comics are are the parts that are sort of above human or beyond human, like beyond the scope of human awareness. Like I like Doctor Strange and Doctor Fate um Dream of the Endless and John Constantine and all of those characters specifically because they are above human. In my opinion, one of the greatest things about Doctor Strange is that he essentially tries to live down his humanity. He tries to essentially rise above his humanity. And that is the part of comics that I find the most compelling. Now, granted, I'm aware I'm not the only, or I'm far from the only perspective on this, but I think trying too hard to tether explicitly non-human or superhuman things to humanity is limiting it. That's one of the reasons why we haven't gotten a good Doctor Strange story in 30 freaking years, because they won't let him be cosmic and weird. I don't want to overemphasize humanity at the expense of the weird, awesome, out there, crazy fucking drug fueled storytelling that you can only get in a comic. And that is the truly glorious thing. The stories, the really exemplifying stories of comics are stories you can only tell in comics. The weird shit, the over the top campy shit, the B movie things, the high concept stuff. When it comes to stuff like that, you really can only go comic or comic adaptation. And I like that stuff. That's what I go to comics for. I don't go to comics for humanity. I go to comics for not even necessarily an escape from humanity, because that implies escapism and I hate that shit. But for and for the notion that there's more to the world than humanity. The fact that in my opinion, I think the fact that humans can't control everything in existence is one of the things that makes existence, or at least can't um, subjugate everything in existence, are the best parts of existence. The fact that it's not all about humans and humanity. Granted, I'm aware I'm in the minority there, but please, for the love of God, let weird shit be weird shit and don't humanize it if it doesn't need to be. Because the weird shit you can get in comics or that kind of weird shit you can only get in comics, and we would be lost without it.
Maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Because guess what? The business will come back. This should be your moment of inspiration. Because if anything just comes back in the same way, what the hell is the point? This is your chance to make a first impression for the second time. Use it. If the entire business just picks up with part 5 of a 7-part storyline that people have forgotten about because it went dark 90 days ago, you're fooling yourself. No one is going to come back with the same level of excitement.
Agreed. Especially if they come back to nothing but social justice tripe. Also, I think you might be being overly charitable by saying it'll be 90 days ago, because some estimates have us being in lockdown until September.
Oh, God damn it.
So just throwing that out there. I'm not saying we'll be in lockdown until all the way in September. I'm just saying it'll probably be like August at the earliest before we get unlocked down here. Hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I am the authenticator, and sometimes that implies telling people things they don't want to hear because it appears to be both true and valuable information.
Right. And comics will need excitement. It will need something different. It will need a human connection. Okay, I agree with everything except the human connection, because I'm kind of on both sides of this with you, Dalton.
Mm-hmm.
Though, granted, how I could interpret human connection, obviously, just make sure you have characters that are compelling in a way.
Yeah.
But again, that's more of writing than anything, so I don't think he's really properly described his or defined his terms.
Yeah, no, he's not good at expressing his point. He has a good point somewhere in there, but he's really bad at expressing it. Case in point, I see that as a contradiction in terms. To need something different and exciting is basically the opposite of needing a human connection. Because human connection implies quote unquote realism and street level them. And that's not that's not very exciting, at least to me personally, and it's certainly not different. Every and this is, I guess, a place for me to better explain what I was explaining earlier. Every medium can tell a basic bitch street level quote unquote realistic story, but only comics can go campy and weird like it does. It's the campy, weird, out there unorthodox fantasy meets sci-fi meets cosmic meets comedy meets every other flavor in between in this weird melting pot thing. That's what makes comics comics, not the street level human connected stories. And I'm not saying there's not a place for those. I'm not saying you can't enjoy those or even primarily enjoy those. But I am saying that in terms of what defines comics as a medium, it's the weird shit. The weird shit that no other medium can go for. And I don't need a human connection there. I need the weird shit to be as weird as possible and to be as philosophically meaningful as possible without getting moralistic. Please. I don't need to hear about, you know, I don't need to hear about Doctor Strange's emotionally scarring backstory except when we revisit the origin. I need him to be the the unreachable paragon that stands at the gate so that the world doesn't fucking come to an end, so that the sun rises tomorrow, and so on. And the same is true of every other weird or cosmic character. Let them be non-human. It's their non-humanity that makes them awesome in a lot of cases.
Yep. Okay. So, world has changed. Who is stupid enough not to acknowledge that change? We have time, but we also have a specific time, one characterized by the unknown, by the death of loved ones, by strife. What?
What? Did did we read that wrong? Because that came out of nowhere.
No, no, that's what's written. Well, okay, let me well, yeah, no, that's written.
Can,
That,
can you read it again so that I can at least mull it over more? Because
yeah, yeah.
that came out of left field a little bit.
The world has changed. Who is stupid enough not to acknowledge that change? We have time, but we also have a specific time, one characterized by the unknown, by the death of loved ones, by strife. Okay, so obviously he's talking about,
Okay, so he's talking about essentially make use of the moment you find yourself in as a source of like inspiration and to shape pop culture accordingly. Which yeah, perfectly reasonable. Okay. It sounded like it came out of nowhere, but it makes sense in context. Okay, moving on.
I still think it's weird because it just seems like it does kind of
Well,
come out.
no, it's like how in the 70s they used like the Vietnam War as inspiration, or in the early 2000s when every story was a reference to 9/11 somehow. I think that's sort of what he means. Like we now live in a new cultural atmosphere that we haven't had for a long time, so make use of it as like a source of inspiration, I think, is what he's getting at. Again, he's making a very good point, but he's making it very poorly.
Mhm. It's in times of great strife that great inspiration, great creativity, and great impact can be found. Writer J. Michael Straczynski was a mere 6 issues into his run on Spider-Man when the events of September 11, 2001 hit. Marvel asked him to use Marvel's most everyman character to respond to the tragedy. Oh
Oh,
yeah, I got it.
okay. A great story did come out of that, but incidentally, Marvel, go fuck yourselves. You don't get to dictate what a author does with a character unless they're actually mucking up the the continuity or the mythology or whatever. You don't get to say we need to use this as a means to respond to this. You shouldn't be using characters as pulpits for socio-political or even historical bullshit. If it ha- if it happens that the person in question is inspired to tell that kind of story, that's one thing, but you do not get to tell them that may be how we get the really awesome Michael Straczynski run of Spider-Man, but it's also how we get Secret Empire. It's Marvel going, hey, nobody likes Trump. We should make Captain America a Nazi to comment on Trump. Derp. Yeah, no, fuck off. Characters aren't pulpits. Characters exist of and for their own sake, for their own reason. Piss off.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Um, hmm. I had a 5-day deadline to get something written that would take the place of the next scheduled issue. Straczynski remembers today. I had no idea how to do it. I knew the words needed to address that tragedy were in the dictionary, but no idea which ones to use or in what order to put them.
Okay, see, and in the immortal words of Adam Savage, there's your problem. You asked him directly to basically make Spider-Man a pulpit character, and even though it worked because JMS is pretty awesome and the inspiration did strike on cue, for every one of those, there's a secret empire. And I can't even imagine how many bad zombie stories are going to come out of COVID because my virus. Ima- imagine if they had just let the story that was going to be told, and then like later on maybe JMS could have said something about 9/11 when the inspiration actually hit him, rather than doing it by editorial mandate. Fuck you, Marvel editors. You're exactly that we get to say so because reasons attitude is exactly how we ended up in this situation in the first place. You don't get to use characters as socio-political or moral pulpits. Fuck right off, please. Moving on.
I on the next to last day, I was in the producer's trailer while shooting a location in Vancouver for the TV show Jeremiah. When I took one last shot at it, and suddenly the words were just there, as if they were coming out of a radio, just that specific and clear and immediate. I wrote them down as fast as I could. My laptop was at the office, so I was handwriting them on a notepad, almost like engaging in automatic writing. When I hit the end, I was less than an hour after starting. No editing afterward. What you see in the issue is what came out in that rush. I've never been on that particular frequency before or after, and I have no explanation for how it all came together. Great strife, the unknown, inspiration.
Yeah. So, given that we just covered a Neil Gaiman story, thanks, Dream. But that's exactly the point. Had whatever inspirational forces decided not to show up at that exact moment, what we would have gotten might have been as bad as Secret Empire. That's why you shouldn't make your characters socio-political mouthpieces, Marvel editors. And I don't know where in the lake of burning shit you got off thinking that that was your fucking job. But that's essentially the embryonic stage of the problem we currently find ourselves in. Because some asshole editor at Marvel got it in their heads that they can do that, and then every story was social justice good, Orange Man bad, so on and so forth. So, yeah, no, it worked one time, and because it worked one time, because the circumstances were such that it was allowed to work that one time, it became the norm, and this is exactly the problem with the deconstruction narrative. It worked really well for Frank Miller, Alan Moore, to a lesser extent Neil Gaiman, all of those really subversive comic writers. But because it worked really well that one time, it became the status quo for some godforsaken reason, and now every story is shit because of it. Doctor Strange losing his powers worked really well that one time when it was done in Strange Tales Volume 2, the book he shared with Cloak and Dagger, and so now every story has to be he fucks something up out of character and loses powers. Captain America turning his back on America worked really well that one time when he became Nomad, and now every storyline is either Captain America gets fucked with a la Secret Empire, or Captain America loses faith in America because the writers don't like the way that politics is currently going. Fuck off. You can't just take an outlier or an exception to the rule and make it the rule and expect it to still hold up. You can't rely on whatever forces control inspiration to just churn it out like it's a fucking factory. That's not how inspiration works. If that was how inspiration works, we probably wouldn't have a separate word for it. Moving on.
All right. We all have those qualities again now. The cloud of COVID-19 comes with the silver lining of an abundance of time. Publishers don't need to feed the next issue as fast, and Giant Summer Crossover is definitely on hiatus. Our shared unique circumstance can be turned into a positive, but only if you take the wheel and do it.
I mean, yes, but hopefully not in the way he's described here. Hopefully in the way he actually means and not in the way he's described. Giving him quite a lot of benefit of the doubt here because he does seem to get it. He just doesn't seem to have like not all the appropriate structures are aligning right in his brain. I don't think the message is there. It's just garbled like a transmission on those old style TVs with the antennas on them when you don't have the antennas set up right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so do it, or you've wasted the moment. Do it, or you've let a 90-day full lull you into submission. Do it, or you've let the circumstance win. You have the time to hit a reset button in your head, to pause and reflect and think about what matters. So use the time, make it matter.
See, this is the problem with addressing modern comic writers when you say that. When you say to a social justice advocate, make it matter, they hear make it socio-political rather than make it internally valuable for its own sake. So I hope to God this makes it to some old school comic writers and not the current crop of them. But I appreciate the sentiment. Yeah, it's just I don't see this going well because either it will be entirely ignored and it will go to waste, or it'll piss some people off and they'll do the exact opposite just to fuck with you, like they always do with the original CG, or they will misinterpret it like fuck and we'll end up with a bunch of secret empires based on, virus related zombie plagues. We'll end up with a Nazi virus or something. And given that Trump is still in power through COVID-19, I'm sure that that's not too far of a stretch. And then it was quiet. Brainstormer?
Oh, I'm still here. I'm just setting up the next thing,
Okay.
which was our last thing. And, huh.
Yeah, and it's not even 10 o'clock yet. We made good time.
Super weird.
I think it's because we kept the sidebars to a minimum.
Yeah. I mean, there really wasn't much to sidebar about.
Yeah.
All right. So the last thing is a trailer. I had sent to Dalton, and we both agreed on covering. This was for Dalton.
I almost sent this to you, but I didn't originally think there was much to cover. But hopefully there will be enough.
Right. So this is Lovecraft Country, official teaser for HBO.
I am skeptical because trying to make a straight up horror thing with Lovecraft kind of ignores all the shit that makes Lovecraft awesome. So skeptical.
Hmm. All right. So well, it's actually not even based on Lovecraft himself. It's based on a 2016 novel by Matt Ruff. Uh, I'll read the synopsis later. Wasn't it supposed to be no, this wasn't. Oh, yeah, no, it's produced by J.J. Abrams and Jordan Peele and a few others I'm not really aware of.
Okay, so I'm doubly skeptical now.
Right. Right. So, yeah. Well, what's a word that suits Lovecraft?
Um, a word that suits Lovecraft. Hmm. That's a. That's. I'm trying to remember if there are any like food related things. There are no like Lovecraftian food items, but the first thing that popped into my head was Kadath. Kadath is like a a a city in Lovecraft version of like the Dreamscape, called the Dreamlands, and one of the one of my favorite Lovecraft stories is called Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, which is essentially a story about someone in the Dreamlands looking for Kadath. So Kadath, I guess.
No, it is.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. This back. Getting reacquainted with old friends.
Uncle George, the reason I'm back home, my father, he's gone missing.
Well, it certainly has. I'm certainly seeing elements of Jordan Peele.
Yeah, there's definitely some Peel in there.
Mostly how like the trailer music is going, or how it starts upbeat first, and then
Yeah, no, it's the good aspects of Jordan Peele, definitely so far. But speaking of stories that refuse to be about anything other than socio-political crap, Jordan Peele kind of seems to have that problem. Everything with him comes back to something, 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 politics and black people.
Yeah, because this is set in like I believe either 50s or 60s.
Okay, well, at least it's a setting that makes sense to have something, 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 politics and black people as a like running theme. That being said, I am not looking forward to Jordan Peele's second season of his version of Twilight Zone.
All right, so yeah, I really got nothing to say for the first 20 seconds.
Yeah, no, there's not really much in the. See, I figured since this was mostly a teaser, there wouldn't be too much, but maybe I'm wrong. Kadath.
Kadath.
He's gone missing.
1, 2, 3.
He wrote me. The place he wants me to go is in Lovecraft country.
1, 2, 3. This place. 1, 2, 3. It's dangerous.
Oh, I went over the 20.
Yeah. In the immortal words of CinemaSins, roll credits. Someone said Lovecraft Country. I'm not seeing a whole lot of Lovecraftian elements so far, and that annoys me.
It's mostly just horror elements, which, granted, again, Lovecraft is kind of part of horror, but it's a very different brand of horror.
Yeah, like it's supposed to be cosmic in nature, and I'm not seeing a whole lot of cosmic here.
Well, I think it has a setup of an old-fashioned Lovecraftian novel, like how it's going to a certain place that apparently has like some bad juju around it.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, most of the time he would set it up by the sea, wouldn't it? Like a town.
If you're thinking of Dagon, probably. There's a lot of different places that Lovecraft can definitely tell a story. I'm not. See, I'm not. There are two things that I can conceive to look for whenever I'm looking for Lovecraft. Either it's weird, trippy, cosmic shit, or it's having to look away from weird, trippy, cosmic shit. Because the thing is, as much as we focus on, you know, tentacles and monsters and shit with Lovecraft, a lot of the point of Lovecraft is the things in question couldn't be conceived of by the human mind. Therefore, the best way to depict Lovecraftian shit in film is to abide by the Alfred Hitchcock rule, there's nothing more frightening than an unopened door, to essentially film around the effect rather than actually directly showing it. Because they as synonymous with it as they are, Lovecraft didn't actually employ a whole fuck ton of tentacle monsters. He specifically avoided describing a lot of shit or describing things in such like specific yet contradictory terms that your brain literally short circuits if you try to think about it too long. So I'm not seeing either of those here, and it's kind of annoying me. It's just like this is the setup for like a ooh, this town is spooky weird, trust us. And there's not a whole lot of Lovecraft in here. Now, granted, that might be because the book was like that. I didn't realize this was based on a book until you mentioned it just now. So it might just be, it might have used Lovecraft in the same way that like Lock and Key uses Lovecraft as the name of the town to sort of give us an idea of where we're heading. But if I was promised Lovecraft, I want some goddamn Lovecraft here, please. Get off.
Yeah, one second, I was trying to look at comments and got none, so.
Ah, okay.
All right.
I thought the world was one way. And found out it isn't.
Okay, so yeah, again, like it's really coming off as just kind of. It seems to have multiple different elements of horror, like creature feature, supernatural, and a couple others I can't really remember the names
Yeah,
of. But
I'm not really seeing much that like none of this is standing out as remarkable. Like Stranger Things does Lovecraftian shit sometimes, and they do it better. Like I said, Lock and Key is like a Lovecraft adjacent, and they did it better. In particular, a movie that I recently kind of fell in love with that's on Amazon Prime right now, called To Cast a Deadly Spell, starring Fred Ward, did Lovecraft better, and that was sort of even in the context of like a pulp detective story. So, yeah, there's a lot more. Even if anyone remembers the cartoon Secret Saturdays, from like the early 2000s, they skirted around sort of Lovecraft areas a lot, and they did it better. So I'm having an extremely hard time buying this at this point as anything other than a generic horror show that's going to disappear into the ether after 5 minutes. It seems a lot more like American Horror Story almost. I could definitely see this as like a American Horror Story season, and I think even American Horror Story is doing this kind of stuff better. Even, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, even Chilling Adventures of Sabrina is bringing in more and more Lovecraftian elements lately, and they appear to be doing it better. So, yeah, just to warn the executives at HBO, maybe it's because none of the effects shots are ready yet, but you can still sell like an atmosphere or a story or like even just like a setup, and I would be in. But like even the Nickelodeon show House of Anubis kind of touched on that sort of, don't look into the abyss of the unknown aspect more, and you appear to be failing.
Kadoff.
Kadoff. Yes.
Two, three.
I haven't even gotten to the real strange part.
Yeah, no, I got nothing to really say.
Yeah, there's little bits and pieces of style here and there that I can see working maybe, but I remain unconvinced.
Yeah.
We'll see if there's an actual trailer sooner or later. Maybe that will be a thing.
Right. Okay. Because again, like, I'm not the biggest Lovecraft fan. I tried to get into it once or twice. I like certain elements of it,
Hmm.
but like actually trying to read the stories tends to be a little.
Yeah, Lovecraft is a very a very posh motherfucker. So if
Well,
you're not,
it's not even his works. It's more of the genre itself that I have issue reading
mm,
because it always seems like I don't know. It's very hard to read it for like to me.
mm.
I always feel confused when I'm trying to read it.
Well, to be fair, that's kind of part of the point.
Yeah, I
Is
understand it. But
it's like staring in. It's supposed to be like staring into the void of something your brain literally doesn't comprehend.
right, okay. So just if I'm understanding like the general premise for a lot of Lovecraft's works, it's usually a person who most of the time does not have their mental state isn't always there, not fully.
Well, partly that, but
But and then they go to a place that it has that kind of weird air about it for like a reason. Most of the time, I think a Lovecraft story is both a psychological thriller and a detective story as well,
well,
and then evolves into that very much that cosmic horror sense.
mm, mm, mm.
Like I said, I don't know much about Lovecraft, so
It's a yes and no kind of situation because there are a lot of stories that are like that. Usually though, it's a person who has their mental faculties together at first, and then slowly comes unraveling.
okay,
There's sometimes where it's implied that the person was kind of woo to begin with, but usually it's even a like hardcore skeptic, like a journalist or a scientist or something, and usually you'll get like the crazy hermit, or the crazy cultist, like turn back ye now, for ye know not what lies beyond the stars, and so on and so forth, and whatnot like that, and then they get to the place. It's sort of in the same way that in a horror movie with like a cursed object or a magical object, it's always it's always marked with like a do not open or do not read or do not touch kind of sign, and then people do it anyway. That's sort of the impulse that that Lovecraft plays on. Because the thing about the Eldritch horrors in Lovecraft is, as noble as they are, they're also purposefully addictive. Because the whole point of a lot of the Eldritch horrors, especially the great old ones like Cthulhu and Hastur, is they were shut away eons ago for whatever reason, and now they're waking up, so they want to be released. And in so pursuing, they wind up drawing people to them who were inclined towards them, and then essentially a large part of the Lovecraft mythos resolves with, and then the cultists succeeded in raising the Eldritch horror, and everything went to shit. And the sane, rational skeptic person insane in the process. Usually, the closest thing to Lovecraft that I can shoot for with people who aren't familiar with Lovecraft is the SCP Foundation. They're probably the closest thing you could amount to, like, if people actually had a clue in Lovecraft mythos, other than the weirdos and the occultists and the cultists, you'd probably end up with an organization similar to the SCP Foundation. And I think I might have mentioned this once. A teenage version of Cthulhu is actually an SCP. Brainstormer. Brand. Okay. I'm assuming this is him saying he will be right back. Oh, I can't hear you. I don't know what happened. I'll try disconnecting and reconnecting. Okay.
Oh,
Huzzah. I can hear you again.
no, I was muted. You left before I could tell you.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, no, I agree. And I was actually trying to bring up a picture for Cosmophore as you were describing it.
Ah.
And yeah, yeah, the whole Lovecraft Country thing, it really, I mean, granted, again, it's a teaser, so.
Yeah. But thus far, the best word I can use to describe it is generic.
Mm-hmm.
And
I like the music for the trailer, but that's pretty much it.
yeah, like, but even the average show in this day and age tends to have a little bit more style than that. So it's like, yeah, if I was going to be sold to get the HBO streaming service based on this ain't gonna do it.
Mm-hmm.
I want more. I want it to at least be on par with, like I said, the kid versions of this, which would have been like Secret Saturdays, Tower Prep, House of Anubis, those kind of shows. Even like Goosebumps had a lot more Lovecraft in it than this show seems. And again, it's based on a book, so it might just be the Lovecraft element might just be there for style reasons, but even it just being there for style reasons has been done better in like Lock and Key. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. I got really nothing else to say. I mean, should we just move on to common recommendations?
Unless you wanted to, no, we don't need to look at the Neil Gaiman clip. Yeah, we can do comic recommendations. Unless you can think of anything else to bring up or add.
Nothing really relevant right now, so no. Yeah, I
Okay.
guess. Huh.
This is probably the quickest we've ever gone through shit.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Anyway, as usual, I'm just going to recommend the Doom Patrol because it's really been the only thing I've been able to read lately.
Mm-hmm.
I have this weird thing where I commit myself if I'm doing like reading or something. I commit myself to that one thing. So
Yeah. And let me see, what can I recommend that I haven't recommended of that? Well, being as we just got done talking about Neil Gaiman stuff and Lovecraft stuff, I will heavily recommend Neil Gaiman's Run of the Sandman for the millionth time, probably. But like I said, it is my favorite comic ever written, starring my second favorite character in comics. So, yeah, I can't sing the praises of Neil Gaiman any more than I already have. Also, speaking of a person who I probably can't sing the praises of any more than I already have, if for any reason you haven't checked out Lovecraft before, what are you doing? I'm half tempted to just make you hand over your geek card at that point. Get some Lovecraft in you. It's good. It's good for you, even if it's bad for your immortal soul and your mind. And no, Nyarlathotep didn't pay me to say that.
All right. So with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, auf Wiedersehen, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Shalom. Don't stare the Elder Taurus in the eye, and fuck off. Not necessarily.